At exactly 11 minutes past 11 on New Year's Eve, the most powerful woman in New York City stood alone on a frozen sidewalk, cashmere coat, perfect posture, and a confirmed reservation she could no longer use. Through the glass, she watched strangers laugh, glasses rise, lips meet under golden light. Claire Weston could buy the building. She could not buy a seat inside it. Not tonight. Not alone. She had spent 3 years building walls strong enough to hold an empire and thin enough to crack on a night like this. Then a little girl in a red coat pressed her face to the glass and pointed. "Daddy, that lady has nowhere to go. Before we go any further, if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of noise, if you've ever stood outside something you thought you belonged in, this story was made for you. Take a second right now to like this video. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching tonight, and share it with someone who needs to hear that kindness still exists. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Because what happens next? Nobody could have predicted it. Not even her. Claire Weston did not become a billionaire by accident. She became one the way people usually do, by giving up things that couldn't be measured on a balance sheet, one sacrifice at a time, until the sacrifices became invisible and the balance sheet was all that remained. At 38, she ran Weston Capital, a real estate development firm worth $4 billion, operating out of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Her name appeared on buildings before it appeared in newspapers, and then in both so often that people stopped being impressed by either. Business journals called her precise. Competitors called her relentless. Her executive team called her exceptional, and then, when they thought she couldn't hear, called her other things, all of which were accurate in their own way. What none of them called her was lonely. That word didn't fit the image. Lonely women sat by windows with unanswered texts and cups of tea that went cold. Claire Weston had board calls at 7 in the morning and an executive team that sent flowers on her birthday because her assistant reminded them to. That was not loneliness. That was success, organized correctly. But James had known. James always knew. Her husband, co-founder, and the only person on earth who could make her laugh in the middle of an earnings call, had died 3 years ago, in the first days of January, 2 days after they had sat at a corner table in Harlow's and made quiet promises to each other about the year ahead. A wet road. A truck running a red light on the West Side Highway, 14 seconds that rearranged the rest of her life. She had returned to work in 11 days. People called that strength. Claire had never corrected them. She had taken the grief and compressed it into something load-bearing, something she could build on top of rather than beneath. And she had told herself this was efficiency. She had told herself it was the kind of thing James would have respected. She had placed the reservation at Harlow's 6 weeks earlier, the way she placed everything with precision and intention. Corner table, tasting menu, the same chair she always sat in, the one that faced the window so James could watch the street while she talked and he pretended to listen and was actually listening to every word. She told herself it was ritual. That ritual helped. She had been telling herself this for 2 years. When she arrived and the hostess looked at her with practiced sympathy and explained that the reservation had been canceled in a system migration 3 days prior, Claire did not raise her voice. She asked to speak with the manager. Donna appeared from behind the service curtain, 55 years old, 19 years at this restaurant, a woman who had known Claire from the beginning. 47 names on the waiting list. Donna said quietly, every table spoken for. She was genuinely sorry, and Claire could see it, and it made nothing better. Claire nodded once, said thank you, walked back through the glass door and into the December air. Her phone had 312 contacts. She scrolled through none of them. There was no one to call at 11 o'clock on New Year's Eve to say, I had a reservation and now I don't, and I'm standing on a sidewalk in the cold, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. There was no one who remembered that this particular corner table in this particular restaurant was the last place on earth where she had felt like herself rather than a title on a business card. So she stood, and she looked through the glass at other people's happiness. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself feel exactly how small that made her. She did not notice the little girl until the little girl noticed her. Daniel Ray had almost not come. He had stood in his Inwood kitchen that afternoon, looking at the reservation confirmation on his phone, feeling the familiar arithmetic of grief. The weight of doing something versus the weight of doing nothing, neither of them adding up to anything good. 3 years ago, this calculus had not existed. 3 years ago, New Year's Eve meant Maya in the kitchen making something complicated and wonderful. Sophia balanced on the counter, handing her ingredients she didn't need, the apartment smelling like cardamom and burnt sugar. 3 years ago, midnight was something to run toward. Maya had been diagnosed in March. She was gone by the following May. 14 months, from the first scan to the last breath, and in that time Daniel had learned how to explain cancer to a 4-year-old, how to sit in a hospital room and grade algebra tests so his students wouldn't fall behind, how to hold someone's hand through pain and keep his face still so she wouldn't worry about him. He was still learning how to live without her. For 2 years after, he and Sophia had spent New Year's Eve at home, eating pizza on the couch, watching animated movies, asleep before 11. It was easier, it was honest about what the night had become. But 3 weeks ago, Sophia had looked up from her homework with the gravity that 7-year-olds produce when they have decided something, and said, "Daddy, I think Mom would want us to have a real New Year's this year." And Daniel had opened his mouth to redirect her gently, and then closed it. Because she was right. Maya would have absolutely insisted. He had made the reservation for 3 himself, Sophia, and Maya's mother, Ruth, who had agreed immediately and with obvious relief. Then Ruth called that afternoon with a cold that had turned into something worse, and Daniel had considered canceling, and Sophia had looked at him with her mother's exact expression of patient determination. Here they were. The table was set for 3. 1 chair remained empty. Sophia had pressed her nose to Harlow's front window while Daniel confirmed their booking, and that was when she saw the woman outside, tall, still, standing with her hands in the pockets of a camel coat, looking through the glass in a way that Sophia, with 7 years of watching her father look at things he missed, recognized immediately. She had seen that look on her father's face the first winter after her mother died. She had seen it on Grandma Ruth's face at Thanksgiving. It was the look of someone standing outside something they used to belong to. "Daddy," she said, pulling his sleeve, "that lady has nowhere to go." Daniel turned. The woman was not looking at them, she was looking past them, into the restaurant, into the warmth. Her face was composed in a way that was almost architectural, built to withstand pressure, but her eyes gave her away. Daniel had spent enough time recognizing that particular blankness to know exactly what it meant. He told the hostess he'd be 1 moment. He pushed through the glass door and stepped outside. "Excuse me," he said. She turned. Her eyes found his with the quick, measuring efficiency of someone who had learned to read intentions fast. She found none of the things she was expecting. No recognition, no calculation, no performance of concern. Just a man in a slightly worn suit who was looking at her the way people used to look at each other before everything became a transaction. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. "I had a reservation," she said. "Apparently, not anymore." He glanced through the window at their corner table set for 3. 1 chair conspicuously empty. He looked back at her. "We have a table for 3, he said. "It's just my daughter and me. She'll probably fall asleep before midnight anyway." He paused. "Would you like to join us?" She blinked the smallest motion, but he caught it. The fractional hesitation of someone who had been offered something they didn't know how to receive. "I wouldn't want to intrude," she said automatically. "You wouldn't." A small voice from the doorway. Sophia stood there in her red coat, a star-shaped balloon tied to her wrist. She looked at the woman with the direct, uncomplicated evaluation of a child who has not yet learned to hide what she sees. "Daddy says no one should be alone on New Year's." The hostess, watching from inside, caught Daniel's eye. He gave a small nod. "If you're all together," she said, "we can seat you now." And just like that, the woman who could have bought the building followed a high school math teacher and his daughter through the door and into the warmth. In the brief moment between the door and the table, while Sophia pulled ahead and Daniel guided the way with one hand at his daughter's back, he happened to glance down, the involuntary noticing that happens when you are walking beside someone and the light falls a certain way. Claire's right hand. A ring on the middle finger turned slightly inward, a woman's habit of keeping something private. He caught the engraving in the light before she folded her fingers. 2 initials and a word. J and C, forever. The same placement, the same intention as the ring he wore on his own right hand, the one he had moved there from his left, 2 weeks after Maya's funeral, because he wasn't ready to stop wearing it and wasn't ready to pretend he still could in the way it had originally meant. He looked away before she could notice him looking. He did not say anything, but he understood, immediately and without requiring explanation, exactly why she had been standing on that sidewalk alone. His name was Daniel Ray. He offered it simply, the way people offer names when they don't expect the other person to already know them. His daughter was Sophia, 7.5, currently very interested in pyrotechnic chemistry, which she explained at length while they settled into their seats. Claire gave her own first name without her last, without her title, without any of the machinery she usually deployed when meeting someone new. She said Claire and left it there, and found that the word felt different without everything attached to it. The table was small and round. Sophia had claimed the chair facing the window, which left Claire and Daniel across from each other with the empty chair between them, a punctuation mark in a sentence neither of them had written. Claire did not ask about it. Daniel did not explain. Sophia interrogated the menu with the seriousness of someone making binding decisions, and asked the server 3 follow-up questions about the pasta, and ultimately ordered what she had probably always been going to order. Daniel watched her with the patience of a parent who has made peace with the process. "She's very thorough," Claire said. "She researches everything," Daniel said. "Last week it was the visible light spectrum. This week it's pyrotechnic chemistry. She wants to understand why fireworks are different colors." He smiled. "I'm a math teacher. She's already passed me." Claire looked at Sophia, who was now explaining to the server that copper chloride produced blue, and that blue was the hardest color to make. She felt something shift very slightly in her chest, something that had been clenched for so long she had stopped noticing it. "You teach high school?" she asked. "10th and 11th grade. Bronx, 11 years. He reached for the breadbasket, offered it to her first. "I have an MBA, which I almost never admit in public, but I student taught 1 semester, and that was that." "An MBA," she repeated. "I know," he said, with the tone of a man who had answered for it before. "Wall Street's loss." She almost smiled. Then Sophia turned to Claire with the sudden directness of a 7-year-old who has just remembered something important. "Do you have kids?" "No," Claire said. "A dog?" "No." Sophia considered this. "What do you have?" Daniel covered a sound with a drink of water. Claire looked at the child, the direct, unhurried curiosity of her, the complete absence of agenda, and found she could not produce her usual answer. "I have a company," she said. Sophia nodded diplomatically. "That's okay," she said. "Maybe you could get a dog." It was the first moment in 3 years that Claire Weston had been given advice she couldn't immediately dismiss. They were somewhere in the middle of the main course when Sophia reached into her coat pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases in a way that suggested it had been reread many times. She placed it on the table with ceremonial gravity. "These are my New Year's wishes," she said. "I wrote 5. We were only supposed to make 3. Can we hear them?" Claire asked. Sophia unfolded the paper carefully. "Number 1. I wish Daddy had a new friend." She looked up briefly, found her father's face, looked back down. "Number 2. I wish we had a dog." Number 3. I wish I could see a real rocket launch. Number 4. I wish Grandma Ruth felt better. A pause. Number 5. I wish Mom could see how good Daddy got at braiding hair. The restaurant continued around them. At their small round table, the silence lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Daniel had his eyes on the tablecloth. Claire watched him take one breath, then another, then lift his gaze to his daughter with an expression that was the most complete thing she had seen on a human face in years. Grief and pride and love and gratitude, all of it present at once, none of it hidden. "Those are good wishes, Bug," he said quietly. Sophia folded the paper and tucked it away. Then she looked at Claire. "You can be wish number 1, she said. "If you want." Claire looked at the little girl, then at Daniel, who was shaking his head in a small, helpless way but also, unmistakably, beginning to smile. "I'd be honored," Claire said. And she meant it. It was just past 10:30 when Sophia reached out and grabbed 2 fistfuls of her father's hair and turned his head toward Claire. "Look," she commanded. "Daddy learned to braid for me." His hair showed evidence of a self-taught attempt, slightly uneven, the tension inconsistent in places, but careful, genuinely careful. The kind of work that comes from watching the same tutorial many times because you cannot afford to get it wrong. "You did this yourself?" Claire asked. "YouTube. One channel, a woman who teaches braiding to fathers. I've watched her 40-minute tutorial approximately 11 times. I've improved since the first attempt, which Sophia very diplomatically called bumpy. It was really bumpy, Sophia confirmed. It was, he agreed. Claire set down her fork. Something about the braid, the imprecision of it, the effort visible in every uneven section, tightened something in her throat that she didn't try to stop. "When you love someone," Daniel said, with the shrug of a man stating the weather, "you figure it out." She heard the sentence land. She held it somewhere behind her sternum and did not immediately reply. Sophia turned to the window and pressed her nose to the glass, murmuring observations to herself about the street below. Into the space she left, a quieter conversation arrived, the kind that happens between people who have stopped performing. "She mentioned her mother," Claire said, carefully. "In the wishes. She talks about Maya most days," Daniel said. The grief counselor said to let her lead. He straightened a fork that didn't need straightening. "She leads." Claire was quiet for a moment. "My husband died 3 years ago," she said. She had not planned to say it, but Daniel was not looking at her with the complicated sympathy the information usually produced. He was just listening, his hands still, his face open and steady. He didn't say he was sorry. Instead, he placed his hand on the table between them, not reaching for hers, simply present, and said, "The 3rd year is the strange one. Everyone expects you to be finished. You're still trying to figure out what finished is supposed to feel like. Your wife," she said, 3 years in May. Brief. Sufficient. No elaboration required. Sophia turned from the window. "There's a man with a trombone outside. He's playing something, but I don't know what it is." She tilted her head. "It sounds like a question." Daniel and Claire looked at each other across the table. "A lot of things do," Daniel said, to no one in particular. 3 tables away, unseen by anyone at the corner, a man in a gray blazer was scrolling through his phone with the quiet focus of someone completing work they don't want witnessed. Marcus Webb had known Claire Weston for 6 years, first as a hire she had taken from Morgan Stanley, then as the CFO she trusted with every number that mattered, then, more recently, as the person who had come to understand that trust as an asset with a value he had not yet collected. He was not at Harlow's. He was in a private dining room 3 blocks north, seated with 3 members of Weston Capital's board. What he had was a proposal to restructure the company's governance, elegant, legal, and designed to reduce Claire's operational authority while keeping her public face intact. He needed 3 signatures on a proxy authorization. Those 3 people were in this room. The wine was good. The timing was better. Claire had never, in 4 years of observation, gone dark on New Year's Eve, She checked her messages on a fixed cycle, regardless of occasion. Marcus had tracked this. He had built this plan around it. And tonight, for reasons he couldn't determine, her phone was producing nothing, no read receipts, no callbacks, 7 consecutive missed calls. He noted the anomaly and pressed forward. Meanwhile, at the corner table in Harlow's, Claire's phone sat face down on the tablecloth, vibrating in the slow, insistent rhythm of calls she was not answering. She had looked at it twice, seen the extension, recognized the sender, and placed it back down. Sophia watched the phone. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Claire looked at the phone, then at Sophia. "Not tonight," Sophia considered. "Daddy turns his phone off on Sundays," she offered. "He says Sunday is for paying attention to what's actually there." "That's a good rule," Claire said. "He's good at rules," Sophia said, in the tone of someone offering a testimonial. The conversation moved to Daniel's students, 2 of whom he was genuinely worried about. In the particular way, teachers get worried when they can see exactly what a student is capable of and can't find the key that unlocks it. He talked about Jefferson High the way someone talks about a place they have chosen rather than settled for. "Jefferson High," Claire said, repeating the name from some corner of memory that was sorting without her instruction. "You know it?" Daniel asked. "I've heard of it," she said. Which was true. She filed it without following it. Sophia had moved on to the dessert menu. Outside, the street had grown louder. The year was running out. By 1:45, the restaurant had taken on the particular electricity of a room that knows it is about to mean something. Near the bar, someone started a countdown rehearsal that trailed off into laughter. The servers moved with the practiced efficiency of people who have done this before and are still glad to do it again. At the corner table, Sophia was losing the battle with sleep. She held on admirably through the dessert course, through more pyrotechnic chemistry, through a detailed argument for why blue fireworks were objectively more impressive than red ones. But by 11:45, her sentences were arriving softer and further apart. When her head finally dropped, it found Daniel's shoulder with the practiced ease of long habit. He adjusted his jacket around her without breaking the conversation, without drawing attention to the motion, the small, automatic choreography of a parent who has learned to do 12 things at once. Claire watched him do this. She watched the way his hand settled against his daughter's back, steadying her without waking her. The attention he paid, the way he recalibrated his own posture so hers was supported. It was not a grand gesture. It was smaller than that, and more precise. And it reached Claire in a place that grand gestures had stopped reaching years ago. She reached into her coat pocket. The pen was there, as always silver, engraved. The pen James had given her when she signed her first major contract. The one he'd said should be used for things that mattered. She placed it on the table in front of Sophia. Daniel looked at it, then at her. "She'll draw on everything," he said quietly. "I know," Claire said. Sophia stirred. Her eyes opened still half in sleep, and she found the pen immediately, the way children find things they weren't supposed to see. She picked it up with both hands, turned it over, felt its weight with genuine reverence. Then she reached for the menu and began to draw. The pen moved in slow, deliberate arcs. Fireworks, opening like flowers, spreading across the white margin with the certainty of someone who has been thinking about this for weeks. At 11:58, she held the menu up. "I drew Daddy a friend," she announced. She turned it around so they could see. 3 figures stood beneath the fireworks, blocky and earnest and unmistakable. The tallest one on the left, the smaller one in the middle, another tall one on the right, with long lines for hair. "That's Daddy," Sophia said. "That's me." "That's you, Miss Claire." Daniel looked at the drawing. His jaw was still. His throat moved once. Claire looked at the 3 figures standing under the explosion of color that Sophia had given them, and she looked for a long time, and she did not speak because the things she might have said were not the kind that survived being spoken out loud. "It's beautiful," she said. Her voice was level. Her eyes were not. Sophia held the pen out toward Claire. Claire shook her head. Keep it." Sophia looked at her father. He gave a small nod. She tucked the pen into her coat pocket with the care of someone depositing something irreplaceable. The countdown began at 11:59 and 40 seconds, rippling out from the bar in a wave of raised voices and turned faces. The kitchen staff leaned out to watch. Someone near the window pointed up at the sky, where the first edge of the firework displays had begun to bloom against the dark. Sophia woke completely. She sat up straight with the immediate, uncomplicated joy of a child receiving exactly what she came for. She looked at the window. She looked at her father. She grabbed his hand, then she grabbed Claire's. It was a child's instinct, the reaching out that happens before calculation, the impulse to include, to gather, to make the circle large enough for everyone. She held both their hands and looked at the window and began to count with the room. 10, 9, 8. Daniel looked at Claire. There was a moment, a single, honest moment, where he could have shifted his grip, made the contact more casual, less direct. He held still instead. 7, 6, 5. Claire felt the warmth of his hand. She did not pull away. She held on with the deliberateness of a person making a choice. 4, 3, 2. Outside, the sky cracked open. The fireworks went up in the sequence the city had spent weeks arranging: gold first, then silver, then the long cascading fall of white, and through the windows of Harlow's, the light fell across the room in waves, warm and cold and warm again. 1. Sophia yelled Happy New Year with the full force of her lungs, startling the couple at the next table, and then almost immediately her head was back on her father's shoulder, her eyes closing as if the effort had cost everything she had left. In the noise and the light and the beautiful disorder of midnight, Claire reached for Daniel's hand, not the other way, her first, deliberate. He felt it. He held it, warm, steady, real. At the hostess stand, Donna watched the corner table. She had worked New Year's Eve at Harlow's for 19 years. She had watched that particular corner hold proposals, anniversaries, last dinners, first dinners. She had watched Claire and James sit there every year for 7 years. James turned toward the window, Claire talking, both of them reaching for the bread basket at the same moment without noticing. She had watched the corner table hold Claire alone for 2 years after, and had held the reservation each time without asking why. Now she watched Claire hold a stranger's hand at midnight, and watched the stranger hold it back, and watched a 7-year-old sleep through the whole thing, as if it were the most natural arrangement in the world. Donna turned away. She straightened a stack of menus that didn't need straightening. She kept her back to the room for as long as she needed to. New Year's Day arrived cold and bright, the way it always does, without acknowledgement of what it has replaced. Marcus Webb walked into the Weston Capitol conference room at 7:15 in the morning with the measured confidence of a man who has run the numbers and likes what he found. The proxy authorizations were signed. The motion was prepared. He had timed his opening remarks at 4 minutes. He did not see Claire until he was already through the door. She was sitting at the head of the table. The company's general counsel was to her left. The outside litigation partner was to her right. Between them, a document Marcus recognized by its formatting before he could read its contents. He stopped. "Good morning," Claire said, in the tone she used when a meeting had already begun and she was running it. "You weren't answering your phone," he said. "I was answering my phone," she said. "I chose not to answer your calls." "There's a difference, Marcus. I'd like you to understand it going forward." The next 2 hours were surgical. Claire had read everything. She had responded to her legal team from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., working from her apartment in the quiet focus of someone who has learned to be present for an evening and remain a CEO simultaneously. Neither thing had suffered. Marcus, watching her move through his documentation, had the disorienting experience of realizing he had catastrophically underestimated someone he had worked beside for 6 years. When it was over, when Marcus had been walked out with severance terms and a non-disparagement agreement to review, Claire's assistant set a stack of secondary documents on the table contracts Marcus had executed under delegated authority over the past year. She went through them in order. She was 15 documents in when she stopped. A letter to Jefferson High School, Bronx. A formal decline of the school's mathematics enrichment scholarship application, citing budget reallocation and shifting community investment priorities. The signature was Marcus's, executed under a blanket authority clause Claire had never intended for philanthropic decisions. She read the school's name again. She saw Daniel's face the way it had looked when he talked about his students, not with frustration or resignation, but with the particular stubborn pride of someone doing the most important work they can imagine, regardless of whether anyone else agrees. She thought about the silver pen, safe in a coat pocket somewhere uptown. She set the document down. She called the head of the company's community investment division directly at 7:58 in the morning on New Year's Day. The Jefferson High application, she said, reverse the decision and double the allocation. A beat. The full scholarship fund? Yes. Do it today. She set the phone down and looked at the window, the gray early morning sky over Midtown, the city resuming itself. She sat with it for a moment without reaching for anything. Then she straightened the remaining documents and got back to work. 1 week later, a woman in a long coat walked into the main entrance of Jefferson High School and told the front office she was there to review the school's community partnership programs on behalf of a foundation she could not yet name publicly. It was not, technically, a lie. The assistant principal led her on a tour. The building had been built mid-century and modified in pieces as budgets allowed, worn in the corridors, bright in the classrooms, the kind of institution that communicates effort through the sheer accumulated evidence of having continued. Student work filled the walls. Essays, math proofs, hand-drawn maps, and a ceramic installation in the main corridor that someone had titled, "What We Know So Far." Claire stopped in front of it. "The ceramics teacher did that with the juniors," said a voice behind her. 3 weeks, every lunch period. She bought half the clay herself. She turned. Daniel stood in the hallway with a coffee in one hand and a folder of papers in the other. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize, not surprise, not wariness, something more careful and more open than either. "You're Claire Weston," he said. Not a question. "Yes," she said. A beat. His eyes moved briefly to the left, where a small television in a nearby classroom played a business news channel someone had left running. A familiar face on screen. Her face. "The newsroom in the staff lounge," he said. "Someone left it on this morning." He looked back at her. "You could have told me." "I know." "Why didn't you?" She held his gaze. "Because you didn't know, and it felt like something I hadn't had in a long time, someone just talking to me. I didn't want to change it." He was quiet. Around them, the school continued a bell somewhere, the sound of a class settling, someone laughing in a room they couldn't see. "The scholarship," he said then. "Not an accusation, a naming." "Yes, you knew I was connected to this school. I found out after, going through documents the morning after." She made herself say the rest. "I know how it looks." "You weren't. I need you to know that." He looked at her for a long time. Long enough that she thought she had misjudged the honesty of this the way she had once misjudged everything personal. Then, "Sophia still has your pen," he said. "She showed me this morning. It was on her nightstand." A pause. She asked if she could keep it. "She can keep it," Claire said immediately. "She'll draw on everything." "I know," Claire said. Something moved through his expression, the same weather she had seen at the restaurant, passing through and leaving something clearer behind. He shifted the folder under his arm. "There's a coffee place across the street," he said. "Open late on Fridays." He said it simply, without negotiation. "In case you ever need somewhere to sit." Claire looked at him. "I might," she said. 6 months later, on a Friday evening in early July, Donna set 3 menus on the corner table at Harlow's and did not wait to be asked. She had held the table every Friday since January, not because anyone requested it, not because it was in the system, but because she had watched the right thing happen in that corner once and had decided, quietly, to make space for it to continue. Outside, the city was warm, the late sun coming in sideways through the windows and lying in long rectangles across the floor. Summer in New York, open hydrants, the smell of warm pavement, the particular gold light that arrives just before it goes. Sophia arrived first, as she usually did, because Daniel always let her run ahead and she always took him up on it. She was wearing a dress with small yellow suns on it, and carrying a notebook Claire had given her the previous month, thick-paged, proper, so the ink wouldn't bleed through. The silver pen was already in her hand. It had been in her hand most days since January. She sat down and opened the notebook to a fresh page and began immediately. Because Sophia had learned by now that waiting was something other people did, Daniel arrived 30 seconds later, slightly out of breath, blazer over one arm. He moved his bag from the empty chair between them to the floor when he heard the door. Claire came in from the last of the evening light. She had left the office at 6 early, by the standards she was setting this year, and her assistant had stopped commenting on it after the 3rd week because it appeared to be a policy rather than an anomaly. She sat down. The menu was in front of her. She didn't open it. They had been here enough times that ordering was a conversation rather than a decision. Sophia held up the notebook without looking up. "I'm drawing the building we went to last week. The one with the glass outside. The Oculus," Claire said. "It looked like a skeleton," Sophia said approvingly. Daniel and Claire looked at each other across the small round table with the expression of people who have agreed, without saying so directly, that they are going to keep doing this. The conversation moved the way it did now easily, without agenda. Sophia's summer reading. A parent email that Daniel described as the most specific complaint he had received in 11 years of teaching. A community investment review Claire was preparing for the fall that she had asked Daniel to read before submitting, not because she needed his approval, but because she trusted his judgment. Those were different things, and she had only recently relearned how to tell them apart. Donna appeared. She set down 2 waters and a small apple juice for Sophia, and then, without a word, placed a 3rd glass on the table, not water, not juice. Pale gold, fragrant with something soft and specific. She had mixed it herself, from a recipe in the restaurant's original bar book, a recipe flagged with a small paper tab, handwritten in a name she recognized, James. She set it in front of Claire and stepped back. Claire looked at the glass. She knew, without being told, what this was. She looked at Donna, who gave a single small nod and moved quietly back toward the service station, because Donna understood which moments to inhabit and which to leave alone. Daniel watched Claire. He did not know the story behind the glass. He did not know the name in the bar book, but he recognized the quality of the silence she had entered. He had lived near its edges himself, and he held still and let her stay in it as long as she needed. Sophia looked up from her drawing. She saw the glass. "Is that a special drink?" Daniel looked at his daughter. "It's a way of remembering someone you love," he said. "When you're not with them." Sophia thought about this with the careful seriousness she gave to important things. Then she nodded and returned to the Oculus. Claire picked up the glass. She held it for a moment, not to drink, just to hold. Then she looked at Daniel, and at Sophia bent over her drawing, and at the gold light coming in off the street, and at the table that had held her in the worst year, and was holding her now in something that did not yet have a name, but was warmer than anything she had built alone. She raised the glass. Not to forget, not to grieve. To remember, without drowning in it, which is what 3 years had been teaching her, slowly, in the language of ordinary evenings and small kindnesses, and a 7-year-old who kept a silver pen on her nightstand, where the morning light came in first. Outside, the city moved through the long summer evening. Inside, in the corner, a child drew a building that looked like a skeleton, and a man who had learned to braid hair from the internet sat quietly for once, without grading anything, and the most powerful woman in New York held a glass that someone who loved her had ordered every year for 7 years, and felt, for the first time in longer than she could name, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be.